Today we hear probably the most famous thing Paul ever wrote. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 13. This is the passage that everybody reads at their weddings. And maybe because we are accustomed to hearing these words at occasions when people are getting hitched, maybe we imagine them being addressed to an individual or to a couple. But like everything that Paul wrote, this was a letter written to a community. It was a letter written to a church, addressing the concerns of a gathered group of people in a particular place. And like most of the things Paul wrote, maybe everything Paul wrote, this letter to the Corinthians cycles between admonition and instruction and pep talk. Paul changes between those genres pretty fast and pretty easily. The young church in Corinth has questions, and I think in many ways they are eternal questions. A lot of them are eternal questions. They're asking questions like, how shall we live? What is important? What is good? What does a good life look like? What does it mean to be fully alive? And just like today, there are some less than awesome answers available to them. If I just got a sports car, I would be happy. If I just became a rock star, I would be happy. If I just had a certain amount of money in my bank account, that money that amount you need seems to always retreat, doesn't it? I would finally be happy. And Paul says, no, none of that stuff is right. You may have all these gifts. You may speak in the tongue of mortals and angels, but if you don't have love, you're an air horn. If you have prophetic powers and you understand all the mysteries and all the knowledge, but you don't have, and if you have faith to move mountains, but you don't have love, you're nothing. You could give away all your possessions, hand over your body so that you can boast about it. There's a story behind that sentence, I guarantee you. Hand over your body so you can boast, but don't have love, again, nothing. Love is patient, it's kind, it's not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It doesn't insist on its own way. It's not irritable or resentful even when it hasn't had its morning coffee. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing. Boy, there's something we could think about, right? How much rejoicing in wrongdoing is in there at the moment? But it rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things. How does it do that? Hopes all things, endures all things. Love doesn't end. Prophecies will end. Tongues will end. Bank accounts will end. YouTube followers will end. Skinny jeans will end. Now, we know only in part, and we prophesy only in part, but when the complete comes, the partial will come to an end. When I was a child, I spoke like a child, I thought like a child, reasoned like a child, but then I grew up. And now, and here's the unreal poetry of the King James translators, now we see through a glass darkly, right? Oh my God, that's a turn of phrase to put you on your knees right there. A glass being a mirror. Now we see through a mirror dimly. I think we could actually spend the rest of the morning on that image. Now what we see is ourselves looking back at us, and even that we don't see very well. But then a time will come when we'll see face to face. Now I know only in part, but then I'll know fully, even as I've been fully known. And now, faith, hope, and love abide. And spoiler alert, the greatest of these three is love. So it's the day of the annual meeting. Sorry, I'm making Evelyn Pan here. Sorry about that. I'll step back here. and too much wandering. It's the day of the annual meeting, and I always feel like on the annual meeting, it's sort of, I have this duty to make a sort of State of the Union address about life in general and about grace in particular. And what do you say? What is the State of the Union address at the start of 2020, almost 2 years into pandemic? I guess what I'll say is what I'll say to you this morning is the same thing that I said in my written report, which is, friends, I am tired. And everybody I know is tired. This has been a haul, and it just kind of keeps on going. I really connected deeply with a clergy colleague in another context who said that he reckoned that we were all able to function on adrenaline for a remarkably long period of time, actually, but now the adrenaline has kind of run out. I think it was harder in a lot of ways because this past summer we had this glimpse of normalcy, right? The deal was back to normal by July 4th. That was the promise. And for a while it looked like it had actually happened. I was at a convention this summer where we all had our masks off, and that felt reasonable, and we were singing together, and like, oh, it's over. And I don't really understand psychology, but there's something particularly hard. It's one thing to have something you love and lose it, and there's something particularly hard about having something you love, losing it, getting it back, and then losing it again. Like, that feels like a perverse story and a draining story, and I think that was really difficult. I think as well, I think it was Chekhov's birthday yesterday, and Chekhov said that anybody can manage a crisis. What is really hard is day-to-day life, and pandemic has become day-to-day life. It's become what you might call the new normal, and that's heavy going. So in a moment of Does this one work? Okay, there you go. This is how you know we're live, there you go. It's like I was, as a child, I was fascinated by that story of the Persian carpets, those incredible art, and there always had to be one mistake in them on purpose because it was a sort of act of hubris for everything to be perfect. So this is the one thing that'll go wrong this year, and now we're done. So in this time of tiredness, I wonder about Paul's lens of faith and hope and love as a question for maybe guiding us as individuals, and because this is a letter to a community, guiding us as a parish, wondering about where God might be calling us. So faith in modern parlance, we often conflate with belief, and what we mean by belief is intellectual assent to ideas and doctrines. But I'm actually not sure that's what Paul means by that word at all, or what most of our ancestors in faith meant at all. I want to suggest that what they mean by the word faith is something closer to trust. So the creed begins, "We believe," credo, in Latin, and there are people who reckon that credo would be better rendered in English as "I trust" or "I give my heart." And in the Christian tradition, we trust that gathering in a community like this matters, and that over time it transforms us and makes us freer and more joyous and more like Jesus. We trust that we meet Jesus in this ancient text that we call the Bible, and that we are changed by that encounter. We trust that we meet Jesus still in our day-to-day lives. We trust that we keep on seeing this glimpse of God, and that glimpse will lead us into fullness of life. I think this is what William Stafford is talking about in his poem, when beautifully and simply he says there's a thread, and you follow the thread. Maybe what we mean by faith is we trust that there is this thread that runs through life. We trust, here's Jeremiah, that God knew us before God created us, and God is with us throughout our lives. And that brings us then to hope. All of these ideas kind of overlap. There's a reason that in art, as on the front of our bulletin, these images are all kind of smushed together. There's not a firm border between them. Hope is something different than the idea of optimism. It's something deeper and harder and more challenging and more beautiful than optimism. Optimism says everything's going to be okay, everything's going back to normal, it's the happy ending at the end of the movie. Optimism says, it was all a dream. Pandemic was all a dream, and we can just go back to how it was before. And hope, Christian hope, says something different than that. Hope says that the cross is real, that suffering is real, that unfairness and injustice and hardship are real, and it says that resurrection waits on the other side of that. God is present in the suffering, and God will transform the suffering and the unfairness. This is a moment, I think, when it's really tempting to slip into despair. I think when we're just tired out, it's a time when it's really tempting to slip into despair and kind of announce that there is no hope. I saw someone on social media recently say, I figure that nothing good is ever going to happen again. And friends, a voice like that is not from God. That is not from God that tells you there's no hope anymore. That is a diabolical voice that tells you there is no hope. And I think if we want to find some encouragement and perhaps some perspective in a moment of tiredness when we're tempted into despair, we might do well to remember that this temptation to despair is as old as humanity. I think how much Paul and his friends must have been tempted to despair, how much Jesus and his friends must have been tempted to despair. They lived under occupation. They lived with arbitrary violence. They lived with pandemics. Before vaccines were common, disease running through communities was a thing that happened all the time. They lived with so many hardships, and they certainly could have chosen to be despairing. Similarly, people, I think very recently, had a temptation to despair. The internet is weird, right, in terms of the stuff it recommends to you. For some reason, the internet recommended a video to me, I think yesterday, which was school children in the late 1960s talking about the future. It's fascinating. So first it was fascinating. The kids were all wearing like dresses and neckties. It was more formal than I expected it to be in 1967. But so the question that was put to the kids was, what's it going to be like in the year 2000? So the distant future, the year 2000. And there was a prediction that ran through. Kids were being interviewed individually, but there was a prediction that ran through that one child after another repeated. Do you know what it was? Oh, that's an interesting guess. There might be flying cars. So yes, there were some technological predictions. The prediction that recurred from one child to another is that before the year 2000, the world will end in nuclear annihilation. These were folks who had fallen into despair. And it's worth noticing that their hopelessness for the future turned out to be mistaken. If we are tempted to sort of give up, if we're tempted to lapse into despair, remember Jeremiah. Jeremiah who says to God, I can't do it, I'm just a kid. And what does God say to Jeremiah? Don't say, I'm just a kid, I made you. I knew you before you were born, and I do not make junk. I am with you throughout your life. I'm not interested in small plans. Go forth. And last of all, the greatest of these three, which is love. Richard Rohr has said that love is the test for authentic revelation. If you hear something, if you have an idea, and it is less loving than the most loving person you know, that is not authentic revelation. Nothing good is ever going to happen again in the future. Is that as loving as the most loving person you've ever heard? That is not authentic revelation. I want to suggest that a great many things, when we use love as a lens, have some clarity around them. Choosing to let our neighbor sleep on the street maybe does not meet the test of love. Being indifferent to the environment does not meet the test of love. There's any number of examples we could give. I think we know love when we see it in another person. These are people about whom we speak and we say, oh, when I was talking to that person, it was like I was the only person in the room. They had their attention was on me entirely. Desmond Tutu died a few weeks ago, and when he died, I think it was Rowan Williams, the former Archbishop of Canterbury, who said that there's two types of narcissists in the world. There are people who love themselves so much that they can't see anyone else. And there are people who love themselves so much that they want to love everyone else equally, that they've discovered what it is to totally love yourself, and they want to share that with the world. And Williams said, Desmond Tutu loved being Desmond Tutu, and he wanted everyone else to have that gift and that kind of joy. A friend from high school was just sharing on Facebook, someone I still keep up with, that a few years ago, he and a bunch of friends were at a New Year's Eve party. They're all young parents, up past their bedtimes, and they're all tired because that is the natural state of young parents. And they were ready for the party to wrap up when a neighbor came in who was an elder, a widower, and he walked into the room, and everyone lit up with joy. He said it was like Norm coming into Cheers. I don't know if you remember that show. It was a while ago. It was like Norm coming into Cheers. Everyone was just delighted to see this guy. And my friend said, I don't know what it was about him that made him like that, but I know that when I am an elder, that's how I want to be. That's what I want to be like. And I don't know what the lessons of that person's life are either, but one thing I can tell you, one thing I can guarantee you, is that person was not loved for any of the stuff that consumerism tells us we're going to be loved for. I guarantee you that the room did not light up because he pulled up in a sports car, or because he had the biggest house on the block, or because he had the nicest TV. Something else was going on that made folks glow when they saw him. I'd like to suggest that the lens of faith, hope, and love, that using that as a lens for discernment for us as individuals and for us as community can be transformational. That when a community focuses on faith, hope, and love, it is much less likely to behave in a selfish or a destructive way. And I think this is a greater risk for Episcopal parishes, actually. It is much less likely to focus its energies on maintenance above all, which then leads it into a long and comfortable decline. But I don't have anything against maintenance, by the way. Maintenance is excellent. I'm a big fan of maintenance. It's just that the thing we are maintaining, we need to be able to say what the ministry is of the thing that we are maintaining. We need to be able to say we're maintaining something that furthers faith, hope, and love. And on this annual meeting day, I want to suggest to you that Grace is a place that has a vision that is focused on faith and hope and love. We are building a new building on this location. We're going to put 85 units of affordable housing on this campus with the help of Northwest Housing Alternatives, with our partners at Grace Institute and FAME. We are going to build a new parish hall. We're going to build amazing new art space, including a theater. We're finally going to get the glass kilns and the clay kilns. Is that the right name for the other kiln? The kilns. We're finally going to get them out of the sad basement of a house and into a place where a child can safely approach them. We are going to craft partnerships we haven't even dreamed of yet. It's an extraordinary vision, at the risk of tooting our own horns, I think it's a bold vision. And it's a vision that as we wonder about how we're going to structure it, as we wonder about the bylaws that are going to govern the functioning of this consortium of organizations in our new building, we can't look to other buildings for boilerplate language, for precedent, because no one's ever done this before, right? This is a new thing that we are doing, which is terrifying and spirit-filled, right? I think this is often where the Spirit is at work. And it's daunting to know that in order to make this new building a reality, we need to raise $13.5 million. That's more money than I just have in my piggy bank laying around. It's a big undertaking, and maybe there's a temptation to lapse into despair at this moment and to say it's too much. Maybe there is a temptation to be like Jeremiah and say, "Oh, I'm a kid. I can't do it. It's too much for us to do." And if that's a temptation for us, and it sometimes is for me, well, let me tell you a story. It's a story about this parish 24 years ago. So it's the summer, and the first ever art camp has just happened at Grace Memorial Episcopal Church. 30 children have attended, and it's entirely volunteer-driven, and it's a success. And everyone is really pleased and happy and just full of delight at this new enterprise. If you had walked into the parish hall on that day with the volunteers who were having, talking about telling stories and celebrating and eating cake or whatever they were doing, and you had said to them, over the coming years and over the coming decades, Grace Art Camp will grow until it serves 1,100 children every summer. It will grow so that it has dozens of young people on staff, dozens of working artists on staff. It will grow so that it has a year-round staff. Its budget will grow to the point where it's larger than the budget of the parish. When you mention Grace to people around town, they will say, "Oh yeah, art camp. My child went to art camp." If you walked into the parish hall on that day and told people that story, they would say, "You are bananas. You're bananas. Can't you just enjoy what we've accomplished?" And they'd be right. You'd be bananas to say such a thing, except that's what actually happened. That is what is actually happened over the coming years, right? And why is that? It's because Art Camp was a project that was plugged into faith, hope, and love. They had faith. They trusted that they were doing something that mattered. They trusted that they were doing something transformational that was inviting freedom and love into the world. They had hope that the neighbors were going to recognize that and plug into that. They had love. I mean, my God, what is a better example of love than a child remembering that they're an artist? Hallelujah. And that fueled the amazing, preposterous success story that is that is Grace Institute and is Great Art Camp. And we are going to do something similarly preposterous with this building project. We are going to build something that is oriented towards faith and hope and love, that serves our neighbors, that invites people in, that transforms people, that transforms us as we do it. We're permitted to be tired. I'm tired. You may be tired. But in that tiredness, be careful. Be careful that you do not tell a story that says, I'm just a kid. I can't do it. Because you know what God is going to say. God is going to say, do not say, you're just a kid. I made you. I knew you before you were in your mother's womb, and I do not make junk. I'm not interested in a small plan. You and me together, we are doing a new thing.